Unaware she owned the hospital where his sick mistress was admitted, he divorced his wife and went to court, bragging in the rain that freedom was a signature away. Daniel Brooks believed humiliation could be notarized like arrogance, and Amara Okafor would fold like a wet paper file. The storm had started before dawn, drumming on the glass atrium of Meridian Medical Center, thunder rolling like a gavel over the city. The lobby cameras caught everything. Daniel's jaw set. Vanessa Moore, pale in a wheelchair, and Amara standing by a red umbrella she never opened. "Without me, you're nothing," Daniel hissed as a nurse pushed Vanessa toward the elevators, the word nothing landing between them like a dropped scalpel. Amara did not answer, her fingers resting on a thin gold ring that had grown lighter each year he wore away its meaning. He smelled of cologne and courtroom polish, a man who mistook applause for absolution. He tugged at a folder bulging with copies, petitions, and a printout of their assets he already imagined as trophies. Vanessa clutched the blanket and tried to look tragic, the way a person performs sickness when the audience includes a man who promised upgrades. Her eyes flicked to Amara, curiosity, envy, the brief, pinched triumph of a temporary crown. "We're done," Daniel announced to whoever needed the line for gossip, "and the judge will see just how generous I am." The glass doors exhaled as paramedics swept through. Lightning carved a white vein across the sky. A security guard glanced at Amara with a soft recognition reserved for real owners who never need to say it. Amara's silence was not retreat, it was architecture. She watched the automatic doors, the insurance desk, the discreet sign for the executive wing, the way a conductor counts beats others miss. Every surface here resisted chaos because she had paid for resilience, shock-proof circuits, redundant power, triage redesigned for speed after last year's audit. Daniel mistook the order for weakness. "Sign now," he said, shoving the folder toward her. "I'm marrying Vanessa, and I won't let you cling to what you didn't build," the thunder replied before she did. "You can't do this," he added, voice rising. "You can't keep dragging." She met his eyes at last, a calm so flat it reflected him back unflattered. "I already did," she said, barely above the rain. The nurse pressed the elevator button for ICU. The doors slid apart. Vanessa coughed into the blanket and murmured, "Let's go, baby," as if need could anchor a man. Daniel squeezed her hand for the camera, then turned to Amara with a smile sharpened for victory photographs. "By this afternoon," he said, "you'll be a lesson." He didn't see the security badge clipped to his lapel in the wrong place, the way it had been issued at visitor level instead of executive. That tiny demotion printed in grayscale. He didn't see the quiet nod between the guard and the admissions manager when Amara lifted her umbrella at last, not to open it, but to tap once on the tile like a soft strike of a gavel. The ring on her finger caught a stray ribbon of lightning and flashed red for an instant, a seal more binding than any courthouse stamp. Somewhere, a generator tested itself and passed. She let the folder rest against her palm and felt the weight of paper that believed it could dictate a life. She'd learned the difference between a signature that binds and a signature that exposes. Humiliation was loud. He'd chosen the lobby for that, but power was notarized, and storms, she knew, exist to rinse a city clean. Amara glanced at the glass wall and found her reflection, the woman Daniel narrated as small, staring back with a posture like steel. She pressed her thumb to the ring, a private oath forming without sound, and in the mirrored pane, the storm bent around her as if it had been waiting for command. The court hearing was set for noon, and by mid-morning, Amara had moved like a shadow through the building that carried her initials hidden in the marble veining, A.O. A joke the architect had whispered, and she alone remembered. On the 12th floor, the operations dashboard glowed with bed occupancy, ICU ventilator stats, pharmacy inventory variants, and a small blinking dot labeled Vanessa Moore. Priority consult pending. A dot Amara watched without blinking until it steadied. Power, she had learned, was the art of making systems breathe without noise. She walked past a staff huddle where the charge nurse briefed on an overnight septic case and a post-op hemorrhage, past a mural of hands painted by the pediatric oncology unit, past a wall of donor names in silver where hers did not appear. Anonymity was both shield and scalpel. In the executive suite, Isabelle, her CFO, looked up from a compliance binder and said simply, "The litigation team is on hold. Your husband filed a temporary restraining order against your access to joint accounts at 8:13 a.m. He cited marital waste." Amara took the binder and the sting in one breath. "Transfer the endowment's discretionary emergency fund to Facility Resilience," she said. "Category code L3. Notify procurement to release the delayed purchase order for the lab analyzers. If counsel calls, tell them I'll be in court on time." Isabelle nodded, eyes steady with the composure of a woman who had walked with Amara through 6 capital campaigns and 1 recession. From the glass, the city shivered under rain. Below, an ambulance kissed the curb and unspooled a stretcher. "And Vanessa?" Isabelle asked, not with gossip, but with triage curiosity. Amara set the binder down. "Admit her on the standard track," she said. "No shortcuts, no delays. Document every order. I want medicine to speak cleanly." She didn't need revenge to sabotage care. She needed the hospital to do what it promised. In the ICU corridor, the air cooled into a disciplined chill. Monitors blinked soft constellations. A ventilator sigh sounded like a disciplined metronome. Vanessa lay propped on pillows, lips pale, the performance of fragility now enforced by lab results that hinted at an autoimmune flare and an infection coiling where vanity dissolved. Daniel hovered, his courthouse bravado repackaged as bedside devotion. He flinched when he saw Amara. Then he remembered the cameras and softened his face until it looked almost loyal. "We need a private room," he whispered to the nurse, hoping to be overheard. "I can pay." The nurse, practiced in the calculus of money and ethics, gestured at the policy placard and the humming swarm of acuity around them. "We'll move her, if clinically indicated," she replied. Amara stood at the door, hands clasped, as the attending ran through labs, imaging, cultures, and the plan. Broad-spectrum antibiotics pending sensitivity. Steroids tapered to avoid immunosuppression shock. Fluids, watch lists for organ involvement. Vanessa gazed past the physician to Amara with something new. Not envy, not triumph fear. Daniel cleared his throat. "You're still here?" he said, trying for lightness and landing in thin. "We have court." Amara tilted her head, listening to the beep that tracked Vanessa's pulse. "We do," she said, "and your mistress has excellent care." I insisted. The word insisted slid into the air and found purchase in the nurse's subtle nod. It meant that if anything went wrong here, it would be documented with a clarity that could be read under oath. In the hallway, Daniel grabbed her elbow, the way people do when they believe proximity is leverage. She freed herself neatly. "You think this building makes you taller," he murmured, "but after today, you'll be a line item written off." The elevator chimed. She stepped in, pressed G, and met his reflection in the stainless steel panel. "You mistake steel for height," she said. "What I own is process." The doors kissed shut, sealing the ICU's measured breath behind them, and she watched, not herself, but the rhythms she had built, orderlies pivoting, pharmacists verifying, the storm outside, stamping its approval as the car dropped her toward a courtroom that would learn the difference between performance and proof. By noon, the courtroom smelled faintly of wet wool and floor polish, the storm having driven everyone inside with dripping umbrellas and agitated tempers. Daniel arrived in a suit that tried to announce inevitability. Vanessa's absence explained by medical necessity in a letter his lawyer flourished like a talisman, and Amara took her place at the respondents' table with a calm that made clerks lower their voices as if entering a ward where precision saves lives. Judge Penelope Hart, whose bench manners were famously surgical, adjusted her glasses and asked for the basis of the emergency restraining order. Daniel's counsel launched into a performance of wounded generosity, painting Amara as an impulsive spender with access to institutional levers beyond the spirit of the marriage, a phrase crafted to sound alarming and vague. Amara's attorney, a lean woman named Sadeh Karim who believed punctuation could be a weapon, waited for the theatrics to settle, then slid a thin folder across. 3 years of audited statements, a prenuptial agreement Daniel had insisted on when he believed he was marrying below his ambition, and a quiet paragraph noting that Meridian Medical Center was held in a trust predating the union by 6 years. The judge lifted her eyes. "Is this accurate?" she asked Daniel's counsel. He coughed, stalled, tried to pivot to access, but the word thinned in the air. Sadeh spoke without flourish. Transfers at 9-2 were from the endowment's discretionary emergency fund to facility resilience per board policy, triggered by a citywide storm advisory. Procurement had released a delayed order for analyzers to prevent diagnostic downtime. No marital assets had moved since the petition. If anything, Sadeh concluded, tone cool and exact. Mrs. Brooks preserved value this morning, while Mr. Brooks attempted, at 8:13, to freeze joint liquidity to manufacture hardship. The gallery exhaled unkind delight. Daniel's jaw worked. He leaned toward his lawyer, whispering too loudly, "Focus on the affair. It will paint motive." The judge lifted a hand. "We will focus," she said, "on facts, to establish waste." Daniel's side presented photographs, charity gala gowns, travel itineraries, a renovation permit for a neonatal wing that Daniel framed as vanity. Sadeh responded with outcomes: reduced infection rates post-renovation, community grants leveraged threefold by the wing's accreditation upgrade, neonatal survival metrics rising in lockstep with the spend. She let the numbers do the cross-examination, each figure a heartbeat on paper. Then came the affidavit that changed the oxygen, a hospital compliance officer's attestation routine, notarized that every VIP request related to Vanessa Moore's admission that morning had been refused or deferred unless clinically indicated, signed off by the attending, time-stamped. "Why is this here?" the judge asked. Sadeh didn't look at Daniel. She looked at the bench. "To address the insinuation," she said, "that my client would weaponize care. She would not. She requires that medicine remain clean." The word clean landed like a scrubbed scalpel on a blue drape. Daniel flushed. "She is performing," he snapped, forgetting the microphone. "She's pretending to be above blood." The judge stared him down. "Mr. Brooks," she said gently, which in her mouth was a warning, "the court is not receptive to performances." She turned to Amara. "Do you wish to speak?" Amara rose. She did not mention ownership. She named stewardship. She described systems built to function without her name: redundant power, transparent billing, ethics hotlines that routed around influence. She admitted she had failed at home, not with money, but with attention. She had watched output metrics while intimacy thinned. She had assumed fidelity was a process that maintained itself. The courtroom stilled at the quiet courage of inventorying herself. "I will sign whatever is fair," she said. "I will not sign what is punitive, and I will not let patients become symbols." A clerk somewhere scribbled harder. The judge removed her glasses. "The TRO is denied," she ruled. "Discovery will proceed on standard timelines. Temporary support per prenuptial formula. No disparagement orders for both parties." Her gavel kissed the block, a sound like a metronome restarting a difficult piece. As people rose, Daniel stared at Amara with the dawning comprehension that applause had deserted him. Outside, the storm receded into a luminous drizzle, and in the faint reflection of the courtroom's varnished rail, Amara saw not triumph but alignment. Facts where noise had been, process where performance once strutted, an incision cleanly made. And the healing clock begun. By late afternoon the rain had thinned to a silver mist, and Meridian inhaled the kind of tense quiet that means the building is listening. Amara used the lull to walk the tiers of care like a captain touching bulkheads. Stopping first at pharmacy to thank a night shift tech who'd flagged a dosage anomaly, then at biomedical engineering, where a junior tech showed her a ventilator alarm log like a child showing a report card. Pride tucked under professionalism. She took none of it for granted. Systems only look inevitable when someone bleeds behind them, and when she reached ICU again, the air had shifted. Vanessa's fever had kicked to 39.6, her white count climbing, cultures whispering, gram-negative, like a rumor with teeth. Daniel stood rigid at the glass, phone glued to his ear, barking logistics to a concierge service he'd summoned to arrange a transfer to a boutique clinic across town, famous for celebrity privacy and mediocre outcomes. He wanted scented hand soap and a healing suite, the way men who fear biology bargain with decor. The attending, a woman in her 40s with a scar along her jaw that said she'd seen worse than tantrums, explained calmly that moving a patient with septic physiology and unstable vitals through traffic was a coin toss with God. Daniel pressed harder. I will sign whatever it takes. And the attending, who collected precise sentences the way others collect watches, said, we do not sell risk to grief, and turned back to the monitor. A small crowd took shape the way crowds do when money snarls at medicine. A transport supervisor, 2 nurses, risk management, and the security guard who had clocked Daniel that morning and understood he was a man who wore volume like armor. Amara did not step into the circle. She widened it. Document the request, she told the charge nurse. Document the clinical advice. Document the refusal. If he insists, the ethics pager is 1143. If he threatens staff, call 1129. If he weeps, offer water. It sounded cold, and it was not. Clarity is kindness when panic smells like cologne. Daniel finally noticed her, and rage found a story. You're doing this to punish me, he said, voice knife-thin. You're keeping her here to watch her suffer. Vanessa, shivering, stared at Amara over the oxygen cannula, and for the first time, the mistress's look carried no theater, only a bright animal fear that collapses all hierarchies of role. Amara stepped closer to the glass, but not inside. Infection control is a kind of morality. You are frightened, she said, low enough that only the glass could learn the sentence. So am I, but fear does not prescribe. She nodded to the attending, who ordered a norepinephrine drip, escalated antibiotics, and hung a fresh bag with the brisk competence of someone who has saved enough strangers to ignore spectacle. The building hummed with alignment. Lab pushed a statgram stain. Radiology cleared a slot for a CT. Pharmacy verified the weight-based dosing with a second pair of eyes. Even the storm seemed to hold its breath to let the elevator run. Down 2 floors, Isabelle texted, Board wants an update. Optics delicate. Reporter sniffing about VIP controversies, likely fed by Daniel. Amara replied with the only weather report she trusted. Care is clean, process intact, ethics engaged. If optics matter, tell them to admire the reflection. She returned to the glass and remembered the first time she saw this ICU as a blueprint on tissue paper, the scribbled arrows she had drawn between nurse stations to shorten footsteps, the extra hand-washing sinks she had insisted on adding, despite relentless value engineering, the day a contractor sneered that no one would ever notice. People notice breath, she thought. They just call it miracle. Daniel's voice broke, not with remorse, but with the raw shock of being dethroned by reality. His hand slid down the glass until it found Vanessa's gaze and held there like a child at an aquarium, begging a fish to come closer. Don't let me die, Vanessa whispered, and the room answered in beeps and drips and measured air. Amara closed her eyes once, a blink that was also a prayer, then opened them to find the attending, watching her with the frank curiosity of a colleague who has counted the shape of someone's decisions. Amara gave the smallest nod, a seal on an unspoken pact. Do the work in front of us. Keep medicine clean. Let confession, if it comes, take the form of outcomes. Outside the glass, the mist brightened. Somewhere above the clouds, the sun was rehearsing return. Evening bled into a rinsed blue over the city, while Meridian held its breath in clinical rhythm. Vanessa's fever dipped to 38.7, her pressure maintained by a thin ribbon of norepinephrine. And the nurses moved with the quiet economy of people counting seconds aloud in their heads. Isabelle messaged a screenshot. Daniel's grin beside a blog headline accusing the hospital of cruelty toward a vulnerable woman, seeded with phrases only he used: healing suite, privacy tier, my resources. Amara read the piece to the end and felt nothing except the familiar click of a system adjusting to weather. Communications drafted a factual statement about evidence-based triage, legal flagged defamation risk, and the ethics line logged 2 supportive messages from staff who had seen the transfer attempt and wanted the record clean. In the boardroom, a subset of directors had assembled an emergency call, their faces tiled like wary portraits. Amara joined with her camera off and recited outcomes. Sepsis bundle, initiated within guideline window. VIP privileges neutralized per policy. Family liaison, assigned to reduce hallway theater. Optics? A director asked delicately. Functioning, Amara said. We are treating a patient, not an accusation. The CFO reported donations stable. A few nervous emails soothed by transparency. The chair thanked Amara and told her to keep doing what she had been doing all day, making noise choose between law and air. Back in ICU, Vanessa drifted in and out, fingers worrying the blanket when pain pushed at the edges. Daniel alternated between performative tenderness and simmering resentment, narrating his own sacrifice to anyone within earshot. He cornered the attending again, another plea for transfer, another refusal sharpened by physiology, and then tried to escalate through a back channel he imagined existed. The back channel was a policy document, and it didn't answer his calls. Amara stepped beside the charge nurse and read the last lab. Cultures suggesting a gram-negative culprit, lactate shrinking by degrees, kidneys still cautious. She asked precise questions, timing, access, adverse reactions, and ended with a thank you that landed like water in a desert. A father down the hall, waiting on a post-op report for his son, recognized her from nowhere and everywhere. The woman who listened as if quiet were a skill, and pressed a paper cup of vending machine tea into her hand without words. She drank it because rituals matter. Daniel found Amara near the hand-washing sink, the smell of chlorhexidine bright as a bell. You think the court saved you, he said, voice low and ragged, but I will take everything with a camera and a narrative. She dried her hands slowly, each finger a deliberate pause. Narratives don't sterilize scalpels, she answered. People live because process holds. He laughed without joy. You don't even love her, and look how you pretend. For a split second his words opened a small ache. She did not love Vanessa, but she loved the promise a hospital makes when doors slide apart for a stranger. And that love had teeth. Near dusk, a reporter arrived with a question shaped like a verdict, only to be met by the policy placard and a communications officer who spoke in steady present tense. Patient privacy is protected. Our teams deliver evidence-based care. We do not comment on individuals. The reporter captured footage of rain guttering off the canopy and left with less story than weather. In the lobby, donors whose names gleamed on the wall read their reflections and decided to be proud of them another day. Upstairs, the norepinephrine eased by a hair, the antibiotic hung like a quiet promise. And somewhere in the building, a prayer, a nurse's whisper, a janitor's hum threaded itself between machines and made the steel feel almost kind. Dawn entered as a pale ribbon, and the hospital exhaled with it. Vanessa's cultures finalized Pseudomonas, sensitive to the regimen already dripping with quiet persistence, her vitals smoothing. The norepinephrine stepping back like a bodyguard told to rest, and the attending allowed herself a small nod that looked, in that fluorescent light, like forgiveness earned. Daniel, empty-eyed from a night where cameras had fewer places to hide, tried one more route. He demanded to see the chief executive, certain that some distant purchasable authority could unfasten reality. Security paged administration. Doors opened, and the boardroom welcomed him the way an OR welcomes a novice, coldly, brightly, with every instrument labeled. He stopped when he saw Amara at the head of the table, Ebele at her right, counsel at her left. Graphs of throughput and mortality curves behind them, like constellations arranged to spell out stewardship. For a second, disbelief wrestled with memory, the marble veining with its hidden A, O, the guard's nods, the way the building bent around her voice. Then comprehension arrived, cruelly uncinematic. You, he said, not as accusation but as scale. Amara did not look at him first. She finished a sentence about ventilator maintenance cycles and supply chain buffers, signed a procurement approval, thanked facilities for catching a pressure differential in isolation rooms, and then met his stare with the intactness of someone who had finally walked past the idea of begging to be seen. You wanted the chief executive, she said. You have her. He tried bluster and couldn't find the octave. All this time, he muttered, glancing at directors who wore neutrality like scrubs. And you let me? He didn't finish, because there is no elegant verb for underestimating a woman who chose silence over spectacle. A director cleared his throat. The hospital would issue a single statement. No gloating, only policy and gratitude. The board supported clinical decisions. Any external defamation would be answered with facts. Daniel backed into the corridor as if pushed by air. Downstairs, Vanessa asked for Amara. The request traveled through proper channels, arrived without drama, and Amara entered the room, stopping at the hand-washing sink, the way a believer stops at a font. Vanessa's voice was a rasp of someone who has seen the seam between staying and going. I didn't know, she said, eyes steady now that adrenaline had spent itself. I thought, she didn't finish either. Humility is unsayable in its first hour. Amara held her gaze, not cruel, not soft. You knew enough to be kind, she said at last. Next time, practice it sooner. She left a small lavender balm on the tray gift from a nurse, a ritual of touch that doesn't trespass, and stepped back into the hallway where the day had begun to sound like promise. By mid-morning, the court clerk filed the judge's written order. Sade forwarded it with a note that read simply, steady. Amara signed the temporary arrangements, fair, clean. Enough, then signed 3 more forms that mattered more: an ethics grant for nurse-led research, a tuition stipend for the tech who caught last night's dosage anomaly, and a procurement request for more hand-washing stations in the visitor corridor because mercy is design. Daniel stood at the lobby's glass and saw himself as Meridian saw him, a man reflected, not revered. His phone, once an oracle, offered only diminishing echoes. The blog post was already yesterday. He approached Amara without the weight of a camera and said, not sorry, but smaller words. What happens now? She looked past him to the automatic doors, to the city washed clean, to the revolving wheel of arrivals and discharges that renders private melodrama microscopic against the work of keeping breath. Now, she answered, we keep medicine clean and let paper do what paper does. Outside, the storm had become a sky with edges. Inside, the generators hummed, as if pleased to be unneeded. She pressed her thumb to the ring, not to bind, but to bless what she had chosen. Process over performance, stewardship over spectacle, signatures that heal instead of hurt. And the doors opened for another stranger,